Salam. La tadkhulunal jannah hatta tu'minu wa la tu'minu hatta tahabbu. Awala adullukum ala syai' idza fa'altumuhu tahabbtum. Afshus salama bainakum.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Puji syukur kepada Allah Subhanahu wa taala.
Salawat dan salam kepada Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Yang kami hormati Rektor Universitas Syiah Kuala yang diwakilkan oleh Wakil Rektor Bidang Perencanaan, Kerjasama dan Hubungan Masyarakat, Bapak Dr. Hizir Sofyan.
Yang kami hormati Bapak Surkani Ishak Kasim PhD sebagai Executive Director of Asian Development Bank.
Yang kami hormati Dekan Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis, Bapak Profesor Dr. Nazir Aziz SE MBA.
Yang kami hormati Ketua Jurusan Ekonomi Pembangunan, Bapak Dr. Muhammad Nasir SE MSI MA.
Yang kami hormati Ketua Program Studi Ekonomi Pembangunan, Bapak Fakhrudin SE MSI.
Yang kami hormati Ketua DPM Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis Universitas Syiah Kuala.
Yang kami hormati Ketua BEM Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis Universitas Syiah Kuala.
Yang kami hormati Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Qala Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, la tadkhulunal jannah hatta tu'minu wa la tu'minu hatta tahabbu. Awala adullukum ala syai' idza fa'altumuhu tahabbtum. Afshus salama bainakum.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Puji syukur kepada Allah Subhanahu wa taala.
Salawat dan salam kepada Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Yang kami hormati Rektor Universitas Syiah Kuala yang diwakilkan oleh Wakil Rektor Bidang Perencanaan, Kerjasama dan Hubungan Masyarakat, Bapak Dr. Hizir Sofyan.
Yang kami hormati Bapak Surkani Ishak Kasim PhD sebagai Executive Director of Asian Development Bank.
Yang kami hormati Dekan Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis, Bapak Profesor Dr. Nazir Aziz SE MBA.
Yang kami hormati Ketua Jurusan Ekonomi Pembangunan, Bapak Dr. Muhammad Nasir SE MSI MA.
Yang kami hormati Ketua Program Studi Ekonomi Pembangunan, Bapak Fakhrudin SE MSI.
Yang kami hormati Ketua DPM Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis Universitas Syiah Kuala.
Yang kami hormati Ketua BEM Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis Universitas Syiah Kuala.
Yang kami hormati seluruh ormawa dalam lingkungan kampus Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis Universitas Syiah Kuala.
Yang kami hormati Ketua Himadipa Muhammad Ikram.
Yang kami hormati seluruh peserta webinar internasional Forum Ilmiah Pembangunan 2020.
Selamat bergabung di acara FIPA, Forum Ilmiah Pembangunan 2020.
Ucapan terima kasih kepada sponsorship Bank Aceh Syariah,
Bank Indonesia,
Bapeda Banda Aceh,
dan terima kasih kepada media partner UKM Inkubator.
Hadirin yang berbahagia, untuk mengawali acara kita pada hari ini, marilah sama-sama kita mendengarkan lantunan ayat suci Al-Quran yang akan dibawakan oleh Saudara Muhammad Ayas Mujahidullah. Kepada saudara, waktu dan tempat dipersilakan.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A'udzu billahi minasy syaithanir rajim. رأس شيبا ولم أكن بدعائك رب شقيا وإني خفت الموالي من ورائي وكانت امرأتي عاقرا فهب لي من لدنك وليا يرثني ويرث من آل يعقوب نمشيك الهدى نسوء يحيى لم نجعل له قبل سميا قال رب أنى يكون وكانت امرأتي عاقرا وقد بلغت من الكبر عتيا قال كذلك قال ربك هو علي هين وقد خلقت شيئا قال رب اجعل لي آية قال آيتك ألا تكلم الناس ثلاثة فأوحى إليهم أن سبحوا بكرة وعشيا صدق الله العظيم. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Terima kasih kami ucapkan kepada saudara Muhammad Ayas Mujahidullah.
Acara selanjutnya menyanyikan lagu Indonesia Raya dan Mars Himadipa yang akan dipandu oleh saudari Febi Nurmalinda. Pada saudari, waktu dan tempat dipersilahkan.
Hadirin yang berbahagia, acara selanjutnya sambutan oleh Ketua Panitia yang akan disampaikan oleh Saudara Muhammad Rizki Maulana. Kepada saudara, dipersilakan.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin wa bihi nasta'in wa ala umuri dunya waddin. Wassalatu wassalamu asrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajmain. Amma ba'du. Segala puji bagi Allah yang telah memberi kita kesempatan, kesehatan, sehat badan, sehat pikiran sehingga kita dapat berkumpul di ruang Zoom yang berbahagia ini. Salawat berikan salam juga tak lupa pula kita sanjung sajikan atas kebangkuan Nabi besar Muhammad SAW yang telah bawa kita dari zaman jahiliyah ke zaman Islamiyah. Penghormatan saya kepada Wakil Rektor Bidang 4 Dr. Izir Sofyan. Penghormatan saya kepada Bapak Surkani Ishak Kasim. Penghormatan saya kepada Dekan Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis Universitas Syiah Kuala. Penghormatan saya kepada Ketua Jurusan Ekonomi Pembangunan Universitas Syiah Kuala. Penghormatan saya kepada Ketua Program Studi Ekonomi Pembangunan Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis Universitas Syiah Kuala. Ketua DPM Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis, Ketua BEM Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis, seluruh Ormawa Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis, seluruh hadirin yang hadir pada ring Zoom hari ini. Pada kesempatan kali ini, saya mengucapkan terima kasih kepada semua pihak yang telah mempercayai saya untuk menjadi Ketua Panitia di acara Forum Ilmiah Pembangunan 2020. Jadi acara Forum Ilmiah Pembangunan ini diadakan oleh Himpunan Mahasiswa Program Studi Ekonomi Pembangunan Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis Universitas Syiah Kuala, yang mana kegiatan itu kita mulai dari tanggal 16 sampai tanggal 19, yang kegiatannya ada webinar internasional, ada lomba debat nasional, lomba karya tulis ilmiah nasional, dan lomba poster ekonomi. Saya terima kasih juga kepada sponsor yang ikut memberi dukung terselenggaranya acara ini, dan terkhususnya ucapan terima kasih juga kepada seluruh panitia yang telah bekerja siang malam memberikan masukan, sudah mensukseskan acara ini dan sudah mengorbankan waktu. Dan saya mengucapkan terima kasih juga kepada dosen ekonomi pembangunan dan abang-abang kakak-kakak yang telah mensupport acara ini untuk terselenggaranya agar sukses. Pada hari ini acara dapat terlaksana. Besar harapan saya semoga acara ini dapat memberi manfaat serta kebaikan untuk semua. Semua pihak. Cukup sekian yang dapat saya sampaikan. Akhir kata, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Yang saya hormati Bapak Wakil Rektor Bidang 4, Bapak Dr. Izir Sofyan. warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Alhamdulillahirrahmanirrahim. Wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in amma ba'du. Pertama-tama, marilah kita panjatkan puji syukur kehadirat Allah Subhanahu wa taala. Salat berikan salam kita sajikan ke makuan Nabi besar Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yang saya hormati Bapak Wakil Rektor Bidang 4, Bapak Dr. Izil Sofyan. Yang saya hormati Bapak Sukarni Ishak Kasim, PhD sebagai pemateri pada acara FIPA kali ini. Yang saya hormati Dekan Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis, Bapak Prof. Dr. Nasir Aziz, SE MBA. Yang saya hormati Ketua Jurusan Ekonomi Pembangunan, Bapak Dr. Muhammad Nasir, SE MSI MA. Yang saya hormati Ketua Program Studi Ekonomi Pembangunan, Pak Fakrudin, SE MSI. Dan yang saya hormati Ketua DPM, Ketua BEM Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis atau yang mewakili, dan yang saya hormati seluruh ormawa ekonomi dan bisnis yang berhadir pada hari ini, dan saya hormati seluruh peserta serta tamu undangan yang berhadir di acara FIPA kali ini. Alhamdulillah, puji syukur saya panjatkan kepada Allah Subhanahu wa taala karena pada hari ini kita dapat berkumpul di Zoom yang mana kita akan mengadakan acara Forum Ilmiah Pembangunan tahun 2020 dengan tema Strategi Indonesia dalam menghadapi resesi ekonomi di masa pandemi COVID-19. Acara ini merupakan acara terbesar Himpunan Program Studi Ekonomi Pembangunan yang diadakan setiap tahunnya. Acara ini dapat terlaksana atas sebagai dukungan dan usaha semua pihak, baik internal maupun eksternal, terkhusus sebagai semua panitia yang sudah berjuang menyelenggarakan acara ini. Saya selaku Ketua Himpunan Program Studi Ekonomi Pembangunan sangat mengapresiasi atas terselenggaranya acara ini dan besar harapan saya agar acara ini sukses dan bermanfaat bagi semua pihak. Mungkin hanya ini yang dapat saya sampaikan. Lebih dan kurang saya mohon maaf. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Baik, terima kasih banyak. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Allahumma shalli ala sayyidina wa maulana Muhammad. Segala puji kita sampaikan kepada Allah Subhanahu wa taala. Salawat dan salam kita alamatkan kepada Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam serta kepada seluruh keluarga dan sahabat beliau sekalian. Yang kami hormati Pak Wakil Rektor 4, Pak Dr. Hizir, yang kami hormati narasumber kita hari ini, saya sudah lama nggak ketemu ini, Pak Dr. Syurkani Ishak Kasim. Dulu sering ketemu waktu masih di Kementerian Keuangan, tapi sekarang sudah berpindah alamat ke luar negeri, agak susah kita ketemu nih. Tapi alhamdulillah bangga kita hari ini ada alumni kita yang sudah bekerja di luar, di lembaga internasional. Mudah-mudahan pada hari ini bisa kita dapatkan pengetahuan, share knowledge yang luar biasa. Yang kami hormati Kaprodi, Kajur EKP, Sekjur juga hadir saya lihat, Kaprodi, kemudian dosen senior, kemudian Himpunan Himadipa, kemudian Ketua Panitia, seluruh adik-adik mahasiswa yang saya banggakan. Alhamdulillah pada hari ini kita bisa melaksanakan satu acara penting. Saya kira saya mengucapkan terima kasih kepada Pak WR4, kemudian Pak Dr. Syurkani, kepada panitia dan seluruh orang-orang yang sudah terlibat, lembaga yang terlibat dalam rangka pelaksanaan kegiatan hari ini. Menarik, topik yang diangkat oleh Himadipa adalah bagaimana keberlangsungan ekonomi Indonesia pada konteks pandemi COVID-19 ini. Kita sama-sama tahu dan membaca secara jelas bahwa pandemi COVID-19 ini telah meruntuhkan kondisi ekonomi dunia, tidak hanya Indonesia, apalagi Aceh. Kita lihat negara-negara yang raksasa ekonomi seperti Amerika, Jerman, termasuk dan beberapa negara lain termasuk Singapura, itu semua pertumbuhan ekonomi mereka minus. Saya baca di Amerika minus 8, kemudian Jerman minus 12. Tidak luput juga Indonesia. Indonesia sudah diumumkan oleh BPPS dan juga sudah diumumkan oleh Menteri Keuangan bahwa kita sudah 2 kali berturut-turut pertumbuhan ekonomi minus, ya. Jadi di periode kuartal kedua minus 5, sekian% dan di kuartal ketiga juga masih minus 3,49%. Saya kira ini perlu ada strategi khusus yang harus dilakukan oleh kita semua. Nanti kita dengarkan pencerahan dari Pak Dr. Syukani. Alhamdulillah beliau sangat berpengalaman, lama di Kementerian Keuangan, kemudian juga sekarang diminta di lembaga asing. Dan kita berbangga, sekali lagi berbangga ada alumni kita yang sudah go internasional, tidak hanya berbicara di level nasional, tapi juga di level internasional. Adik-adik sekalian, dengarkan baik-baik nanti apa yang disampaikan oleh narasumber. Saya kira ini menjadi pencerahan yang sangat baik dalam rangka bagaimana keberlangsungan ekonomi Indonesia di masa pandemi ini. Karena kita tidak paham kapan akan berakhir pandemi yang memang telah meruntuhkan ekonomi dunia, tapi dengan strategi mungkin hari ini kita bisa dengar dengan baik, mudah-mudahan bisa kita selesaikan kondisi yang buruk ini. Sekali lagi terima kasih, saya tidak memperpanjang mukadimah, nanti akan dibuka oleh Pak Wakil Rektor 4. Kami minta kepada Pak Wakil Rektor 4 untuk membuka acara kita pada hari ini. Demikian, mohon maaf jika ada yang kurang berkenan. Saya akhiri. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Baik, terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala asrafil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajmain. Puji syukur kepada Allah Subhanahu wa taala, pada pagi hari ini kita dapat berhadir secara daring dalam rangka kita bersama-sama melaksanakan kegiatan Forum Ilmiah Pembangunan dari mahasiswa program studi ekonomi pembangunan Syiah Kuala. Dan tak lupa tentunya salawat dan salam senantiasa kita sanjung sajikan keharibaan Nabi besar Muhammad SAW. Yang kami hormati Pak Dekan Fakultas Ekonomi Prof. Nasir Aziz yang sangat luar biasa tadi sudah menyampaikan insight-nya apa-apa yang kita hadapi saat ini di dunia saat ini, terutama dengan adanya COVID-19 ini. Kemudian yang sangat kita banggakan bersama, Pak Syurkani Ishak Kasim. Beliau saat ini sebagai Direktur Eksekutif Asian Development Bank di Manila, sebagai alumni Syiah, dan kita semua patut berbangga. Alhamdulillah, Prof. Nasir, saya teringat ya sekitar tanggal 17 Agustus ya, 18 Agustus gitu, begitu tahun lalu, saya berjumpa dengan beliau di kantor beliau. Jadi diundang oleh beliau untuk bisa jumpa di kantor beliau dan berkeliling di kantor beliau. Beliau sebagai Direktur Eksekutif tentunya tidak ada yang lebih tinggi dari itu untuk suatu jabatan di suatu organisasi internasional yang kita ketahui bersama. Jadi bagaimana suasana kantornya, kami sempat makan siang bersama. Jadi terima kasih ini Pak Surkani. Ya, setelah waktu itu baru sekarang lagi ketemu secara online. Saya sangat senang sekali. Selaku pimpinan Universitas Syiah Kuala, kita sangat bangga dengan prestasi dan kontribusi tentunya dari Pak Surkani yang selalunya memikirkan Aceh dan terkhusus tentunya Fakultas Ekonomi kita. Yang kami hormati para wakil dekan, kemudian ketua jurusan, sekretaris jurusan, ketua prodi di lingkungan ya jurusan ekonomi pembangunan di Fakultas Ekonomi, para adik-adik panitia, ketua himpunan, dan para mahasiswa semua yang berhadir pada pertemuan kita pagi hari ini dan hadirin hadirat sekalian yang berbahagia. Pertama sekali permohonan maaf ini Prof. Nasir dari Pak Rektor.
Ya Pak.
Beliau tidak dapat dengan kita bersama. Salam dari beliau dan beliau sangat mendukung aktivitas-aktivitas seperti ini, apalagi menambah wawasan bagi mahasiswa kita. Tidak mudah untuk mendapatkan pencerahan terkait kondisi terkini di dunia ini, apalagi itu nantinya akan diberikan oleh alumni kita sendiri yang tahu banyak tentang kondisi Aceh, dan sekarang beliau bisa meneropong apa-apa yang berlaku di dunia saat ini, terutama dengan kondisi COVID-19 ini. Jadi salam dari beliau untuk kita semua, terkhusus untuk adik-adik mahasiswa, teruslah melakukan sesuatu pencerahan, ya, menambah ilmu, menimba ilmu, dan ini sangat berguna nantinya untuk adik-adik semua. Kita ketahui bersama COVID-19 ini sesuatu yang tidak bisa kita nafikan. Awalnya kita berpikir hanya di China saja, di Wuhan, tapi ternyata kemudian melanda seluruh dunia. Padahal sebelum itu kita sudah mendengar ya apa itu revolusi industri 4.0. Jadi percepatan yang sangat luar biasa dari revolusi industri yang pertama, yang mesin uap, kemudian yang revolusi industri kedua tentang machining, semuanya serba mesin. Yang ketiga adalah dengan adanya penemuan komputer, dan yang terakhir dengan adanya internet digabungkan dengan machining, ini revolusi industri 4.0. Dan dengan adanya COVID-19 ini mempercepat ini semua. Jadi sebelumnya kita tidak membayangkan kalau belajar perkuliahan dengan e-learning, ya kita lakukan, tapi ya sambilan gitu. Mungkin sekali, 2 kali mata kuliah kita lakukan e-learning. Tetapi sekarang tidak ada cara lain, dengan kondisi yang ada saat ini memaksa kita untuk fully pembelajarannya dilakukan secara e-learning, secara daring. Dan tadi juga sudah disampaikan oleh Prof. Nasir, Pak Dekan, bahwa udah 2 kuartal ini kita minus ya pertumbuhan ekonominya. Ya memang tidak mudah, apa yang harus kita utamakan antara kesehatan dan ekonomi, tetapi tentunya dua-duanya harus kita perhatikan dengan baik. Jadi bagaimana kesehatan dalam konteks ini bagi masyarakat, bagi kita semua, itu konsep 3M harus kita terapkan dengan menjaga jarak, memakai masker, dan juga mencuci tangan. Itu yang harus selalu kita gunakan, kita praktekkan di berbagai kesempatan. Dan bagi pemerintah, tentunya menggunakan 3T. Sebanyak mungkin dilakukan testing, kemudian tracing, dan yang terakhir kalau memang sudah terkena dengan COVID-19, melakukan treatment, pengobatannya. Dan di sisi lain, pemerintah kita tentunya ekonomi harus kita genjot. Nah, ini mungkin sebagaimana disampaikan oleh Prof. Nasir tadi, Pak Surkani nanti akan membahas secara detail langkah-langkah apa yang harus kita lakukan bersama, menjadi pemahaman bagi adik-adik kita semua. Kita ketahui bersama saat ini dengan adanya COVID-19 ini dan revolusi industri 4.0 sebelumnya, ini adalah suatu era yang memang volatile. VUCA, ada disebut dengan era VUCA, volatile, yaitu perubahan yang semakin cepat, kemudian uncertainty, jadi suatu ketidakpastian di masa depan, semuanya sudah kompleks, ya, C-nya kompleks, banyak faktor yang tidak terlihat dalam pengambilan keputusan, dan ambiguity, ketidakjelasan pengaruh satu peristiwa terhadap peristiwa lain. Jadi dengan kondisi yang tidak menentu ini, World Economic Forum memperkirakan bahwa pada tahun 2025 nanti itu ada sekitar 85 juta pekerjaan yang akan semakin berkurang, semakin tidak digunakan lagi. Kalau dulu kita ketahui bersama, kalau mungkin 30 tahun yang lalu, Prof. Nasir ya, kalau bisa mengetik itu mudah dapat pekerjaan. Ya. Dengan pintar mengetik, apalagi mengetik 10 jari. Ya, kalau saya mungkin dengan Prof. Nasir mengetik 11 jari satu-satu. Tapi kalau bisa mengetik 10 jari, ya, nah itu mudah saya mendapat pekerjaan. Tapi sekarang tentunya sudah obsolete semuanya. Ya, mengetik ini ke depan seperti disampaikan tadi juga oleh Prof. Nasir ya, data entry ataupun customer service yang atau yang berada front office ya, front office yang berada di bank itu mungkin akan semakin berkurang ke depan ya, dengan adanya ATM, dan sekarang bukan hanya lagi ATM, semuanya serba digital, semuanya disentuh saja. Jadi banyak pekerjaan-pekerjaan yang berkurang, tapi jangan takut ya. Diperkirakan oleh World Economic Forum 85 juta pekerjaan yang berkurang, tapi di sisi lain 97 juta bertambah. Jadi ada 12 juta plus. Nah, dengan kondisi seperti ini, kita harus tahu apa-apa saja pekerjaan-pekerjaan ke depan itu yang sangat diutamakan. Untuk itu, apa strategi kita? Kita harus melakukan apa yang disebut dengan upscaling, jadi dengan ilmu yang kita miliki sekarang ini, apa-apa saja yang diperlukan ke depan. Dan kalau perlu restyling yang berubah, tapi tidak berubah total, tapi dengan dasar ilmu yang kita miliki, kita harus memperkuat juga ilmu-ilmu lain, ilmu-ilmu masa depan. Nah, untuk itu Mas Menteri Pak Mas Nadiem Makarim, ya beliau juga ya pendiri Gojek ya, pendiri Gojek, beliau tahu memprediksi paling tidak menurut pendapat beliau, sehingga ketika beliau jadi menteri ada beberapa regulasi yang beliau sampaikan, dan salah satunya adalah untuk adik-adik semua, yaitu hak belajar 3 semester di luar program studi. Jadi kita ketahui bersama sekarang ini misalnya ada beberapa dari mahasiswa kita di Fakultas Ekonomi ada mengikuti program Permata Sakti misalnya. Di pertukaran pelajar, ya walaupun kita tidak berkunjung langsung ke universitas tujuan, kita bisa belajar bersama. Dan karena memang dengan kondisi COVID-19 semuanya harus belajar online. Kemudian student exchange ya. Student exchange ini sudah kita lakukan di Fakultas Ekonomi misalnya dengan universitas di Malaysia, dengan universitas di Taiwan, dan dengan berbagai universitas lain yang ada di dunia ini. Dan Mas Nadiem juga menyampaikan hak belajar ini bukan hanya sekedar katakanlah student exchange atau pertukaran pelajar, bisa juga magang atau praktek kerja. Kita berharap suatu saat ini Prof. Nasir, mungkin ada adik-adik kita ini yang magang nantinya di ADB, ya, IDB. Ya, di EDB di Pak Surkani misalnya ya. Nanti bagaimana teknisnya mungkin bisa magang di sana, dan juga di organisasi-organisasi internasional lainnya. Kalau ini bisa kita lakukan, maka akan menambah kredibilitas dari jurusan kita, prodi kita, jurusan kita, fakultas kita, dan universitas kita sendiri. Dan banyak aktivitas-aktivitas lain, misalnya riset, KKN tematik yang selama ini dilakukan, dan juga kegiatan yang terkait dengan entrepreneurship. Kami yakin ya, adik-adik semua harus mempersiapkan diri sejak sekarang. Kegiatan seperti hari ini, misalnya mengadakan seminar, ini adalah suatu kegiatan yang sangat mendukung adik-adik nanti ketika lulus dan mendapatkan banyak pengalaman selama melaksanakan kegiatan seperti seminar ini tentang pengetahuannya. Sekali lagi kami dari pimpinan Syiah Kuala, dari Pak Rektor, sangat apresiasi terhadap kegiatan hari ini, dan semoga ilmu yang akan kita dapatkan nanti dari Pak Sultani itu menambah pemahaman kita, mempersiapkan diri untuk masa depan. Untuk itu, dengan mengucapkan Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, maka Forum Ilmiah Pembangunan 2020 yang dilaksanakan oleh Himpunan Mahasiswa Program Studi Ekonomi Pembangunan, Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis, Universitas Syiah Kuala, dengan resmi dinyatakan dibuka. Demikian dari kami, mohon maaf atas segala kesalahan dan kekurangannya. Kami akhiri. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A'udzu billahi minasyaitonir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Hamdan syakirin, hamdan na'imin, hamdan yuafi ni'amahu wa yukafi'u mazidah. Ya Rabbana lakal hamdu kama yanbaghi li jalali wajhikal karim wa 'azimi sultanik. Raditu billahi rabbah al-islami dina bi Muhammadin nabiyyan wa rasulah. Allahumma salli ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali sayyidina Muhammad. اللهم إنك تعلم أن هذه القلوب قد اجتمعت على محبتك والتقت على طاعتك وتوحدت على دعوتك وتوحدت على نشرة شريعتك فوثق اللهم رابطتها وارم مدها واهدها سبلها واملأها بنورك الذي لا يخبو واشرح صدورها بفيض الإيمان بك وجميل التوكل عليك وأحيا بمعرفتك وأمتها على شرف سبيلك إنك نعم المولى ونعم النصير Allahumma amin wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Ini acaranya tidak direkam ya, sayang juga nanti materi dari Pak Surkani. Ya.
Sudah direkam, Pak.
Oke, baik, terima kasih kalau sudah direkam.
Sama-sama, Pak.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good day, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity that given to me by the committee to be the moderator for our today's webinar. Well, who said that we cannot actively participating in any events, even we're struggling in COVID-19 pandemic? And well, being known that we already face a lot of effect from this disaster, I can say. And today's, actually, we have gathered in the hall of the economic faculty to celebrate this event and then participating in the seminar lively. But sadly, COVID hasn't gone at all, and we have to maximize the technology as our go things for our lives. And in today's seminar, we had an opportunity to invite Mr. Shurkani Ishaq Kasim, PhD, as the ADB Executive Director for our keynote speaker. And formally, I would like to introduce him to all of the participants today that has already attended this seminar event. Shurkani Ishaq Kasim comes to ADB with more than 24 years of work experiences, starting career as an international and senior director for climate change and multilateral policy of the Indonesian Ministry of Finance. In these positions, he acts as the primary focal point of Ministry on International Economic and Financial Policy issues. He was the Indonesian representative to many international economic forums and working groups such as G20, OECD, and UNFCCC. Shurkani also worked very closely with multilateral development institutions, including as the alternate governor of the Common Fund for Commodities and as the director of international investment for Indonesia. He was also responsible for the administration of the government's international investment, trust funds, and financial contribution to international cooperation. Prior to that, he was the head of G20 division, serving as the assistant Sherpa for Indonesia and as the finance deputy's deputy. In that position, he was significantly involved in several investment working groups, the energy and the commodity market working group, and the fossil fuel subsidy reform study group. In climate finance, Shurkani has led several important works such as green planning and budgeting strategy for Indonesia, Indonesian climate public finance landscape, Indonesian biodiversity financing initiative, and the implementation of low emission budget tagging and scoring system program for Indonesia. Shurkani earned his sarjana or bachelor degree in financial management from Universitas Syiah Kuala, Indonesia, and master degree in financial economics and advanced diploma in international economics from the State University of New York. He completed his doctorate degree from Victoria University, Melbourne, Australia, with dissertation on inflation dynamics and monetary policy in Indonesia under the supervision of Professor Peter G. Sheehan. So formally, we already know that Mr. Shurkani is highly experienced in solving economic finance and also climate finance. And at the plus point, he also has worked on several programs to recover our economies, whether in international scale and generally in Indonesian scale. And I would like to acknowledge all of the participants today that we are going to talk about the middle term of COVID-19 pandemic's effect. Well, mostly of all of us has already know and understand that we face a lot of economic recessions. Well, not only Indonesia, but mostly all of the countries in the world. And in fact, it's really hard to recover from that. But in today's agenda, we would like to hear the point of view from Mr. Shurkani and also the point of view from ADB as the international development institution that helps the country's member to recover in the middle term from this COVID-19 pandemic situation. And without further ado, I would like to call Mr. Shurkani Ishaq Kasim, PhD, to start the presentation, and let us hope that we get the insight from our today's seminar. To Mr. Shurkani, time and place is yours.
Thank you very much, Maula. Terima kasih banyak. Quite happy to come back to campus Syiah Kuala, Darussalam. I don't know whether I have to make this presentation in English or Bahasa. Let's do both. Terima kasih Pak Dekan, Pak Nasir Aziz, for the invitations. And certainly you are one of my very close seniors that we've had a lot of conversation before, and let's keep doing that. And also yang terhormat Pak Hizir Sofyan, I mean, of course, I hosted his visit in Manila, I think it's about 1.5 years ago. He went there really to promote Syiah Kuala University to several universities. I remember he told me the stories about his effort to really get universities, highly reputable universities in Philippines, and to really sign cooperations with Syiah Kuala University. And it was my honor actually to host him in our office to really show him what an international office looks like. One story I told him, during the work hours, no one really walked down the hallway. When it comes to lunchtime, you see everyone's. So that really show what an international office is. I hope we could see that in Indonesia as well, that during the work hours, no one really walk around, no one really chat around. But then when it's come to the lunchtime or any sort of break time, everyone would just come together and talk to each other. That's how you develop your network. So use that, and I hope, and I believe Universitas Syiah Kuala and Fakultas Ekonomi and Business really going in that directions. Because building network, as mentioned by Bapak Wakil Rektor, is really important. I mean, and this is how I maintain my relationship with Syiah Kuala, with Pak Dekan, and with Bapak Wakil Rektor, really to, I mean, other than being them as my seniors, but at the same time also because it's important for me to really not losing my grassroots, not really losing my sort of origin, that where someone can claim his identity, and I proudly claim as one of the alumni of Universitas Syiah Kuala and Fakultas Ekonomi and Business. As with all the online seminars, I think we need to anticipate for any disruption in our connections. So today I'm joined by my colleague, Pak Priyasto Aji. He's one of the senior officers in the Asian Development Bank Jakarta office. Both of us will very much share what we are going to discuss today on this COVID-19 and how Indonesia can really tackle that. At the same time, also, Pak Aji will discuss a lot more on how ADB as a development institution has been working with the governments in Indonesia. So anyone interested in ADB, you can check on our website, www.adb.org. All the information that I'm going to present here very much covered, and you can find the detailed publications. As Maula mentioned, to me, this is more like an interactive discussion rather than a one-way lecture. I'm not a good lecturer, to be honest. How I do not really get the job as a lecturer, but I believe everyone can share anything, at least something. You know, as a human being, it's really our task and duty to really share this. But of course, as I mentioned earlier, we here really to more like as a sharing rather than as a one-way lecture. And I hope everyone would be enthusiastic to really ask questions and in fact to provide comments. I learn a lot from you as you learn a lot from me, maybe. So Maula also mentioned about medium-term perspective. As a development financing institutions, it's really hard for ADB to really put our attention only to short-term phenomena, to short-term changes. I hope everyone would agree with me that this COVID-19, although it happened quite all of a sudden, but the impact is much longer. It could last even more than 5 years, 10 years. And rightly mentioned by Pak Dekan and also rightly mentioned by Pak Wakil Rektor, how this COVID-19 has shaped the global economy. We call it a new normal. We could call it any other name, but it changed already. One change that Pak Wakil Rektor mentioned is about the use of digital technology. How something that was not considered proper in the past, which become a common practice today. I was in the Ministry of Finance for about 23, 24 years, and I didn't have any opportunity back then to do a conference call via video calls or online video calls with my minister, because that's not the practice. You're not supposed to meet your very high boss, even the highest office, using a video call. But now it's becoming more like a practice. So we should use that. And I hope that should be the new normal also in Fakultas Ekonomi, and with this HIMA DIPA colleagues, development students, to start reaching out, not just as very much Pak Dekan mentioned, not just within your campus, but also regionally, how you can connect to people from other universities, get to know them, like you know your own classmates, and also national level, how you get to know people from other regions. I don't know how many of you really know that those students from University of Hasanuddin, for example, from University of Udayana, for example, and also how many of you really know or have anyone that you can talk to from other ASEAN countries, from Thailand, from Philippines, and also from other countries like Europe and US. That's really important to really give you sort of broader perspective that we're not living alone and we're not living isolated. This is really what I would like to discuss with you all. Let me share the screen and give you, I hope you can see my screen. I would like to really show you, can you see my screen, Maula? Is that visible? Yeah, okay.
Yes, it is. It's good.
Yeah, I would like to really give you 3 messages during this presentation. One is how important it is to understand, as Pak Dekan mentioned, the global economy greatly affected by this COVID-19. But our focus today is more on Asian developing countries. So as I said, we are not living in isolation. We live as a global community. Each and every one of you is a member of this global community. You cannot say that my destiny is only in Banda Aceh, or my fate just put me only in Aceh. No one knows. I never expected to be an executive director when I graduated from University of Syiah, Kuala. At the same time, I never expected that I would work somewhere outside the country. But here I am as an executive director of the Asian Development Bank. Pak Wakil Rektor really mentioned, I'm currently the dean of the board, the most senior board members in ADB. That the first time an Achenese lulusan Syiah Kuala get that job. So, and second message, which I would like to also share and make you aware of, also mentioned by Pak Dekan and also by Pak Wakil Rektor, Indonesia is also affected by the pandemic. We see our economic growth slows, but I would like to put you very much to the attention of the second phrase of this message. We are showing a positive directions of recovery. So we have to be optimistic. We cannot say and blame. Simply blaming is not helpful. All of us, every component of the society need to help each other and need to remain positive. I have a sister who's a medical doctor. She told me every time I met her, don't get stressful. I know you work really hard, but you have to be really optimistic. You have to have a positive mind. And this is what we need from all of us, to help and talk to each other, that we're very much in a positive discovery path. The last message, which very much representing where I work right now, is how global communities, including multilateral development banks, which ADB is part of it, continues to actively assist Indonesia in tackling these pandemics and maintaining economic growth. So we are not alone. We are not in isolation. Everyone helps us. It depends on us how we see this opportunity, how we make use of this, whatever comes from others, to really build our capacity, to really build our strength, to really show everyone that we can do it. That's really important. Now let me jump to sort of a regional perspective. What happening during this regional situation, during this COVID-19? As I said earlier, since this an interactive discussion, I don't want to really dominate, simply to really give you a lecture. Please interrupt me and ask questions if you have, or maybe you can write in the chat box. I think Maula will help convey the message to me, and then I can respond while I'm presenting. Now let's move on to this regional situation during pandemic. I believe many of you are development economics students. I would like to present to you what's happening in the global pandemic arena. And very much mentioned again, as Padekan mentioned, things still worrying. If you see on the left-hand chart how situations evolve from March 2020 to even today, and the graph shows only to August or September 2020. Some areas are picking up in terms of the number of cases. Some areas turn to a bit flat, but still worrying. Having said that, it doesn't mean we cannot work together. It doesn't mean that we cannot really solve the issues. And if you look at more specifically the Asian region, you see how some regions like South Asia, in South Asia, there are India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Maldives, and all these countries. The new cases still increasing because of the population size and the challenges that they have domestically. And Southeast Asia, which very much ASEAN countries, you see, the case start flattening. That show a positive sign. Later on, I'm gonna show you what's happening in Indonesia. And you see other countries start moving up and down. But in the end, clearly the graph show it's moved in much more flattened directions. Now let's move to the next slide. Briefly, I hope you can see the graph clearly. This graph shows the measures taken by the governments in Asia. We call it stringent containment measure. And I would like to particularly show you, I hope it's not too small, East Asia, the People's Republic of China, where this virus started. Although the government has been able to control the virus spread, but the government still imposing stringent measures. You see these darker colors of the bar. That shows the government still going with the same measure that they have had for the past several months. At the same time, like look at Southeast Asia. Indonesia, you see this here, I hope it's clear. Nothing happened in February, started to happen in April. We had a very short lockdown, about a few weeks in April, but then the government start to relaxing the situation more and more, and the bar turned lighter and lighter. Whether that's the right decisions, times will prove. But my point here is even countries that can control the virus still put these measures in place. So as mentioned by Pak Wakil Rektor, really important to really understand what this COVID-19 protocol is. You know, social distancing, put your mask, put your face shield, keep away from others, avoid unnecessary activities outside your own place. If you have to meet someone, do it in a distance and help others to help you. We never know, because COVID-19, I always say this to everyone, COVID-19 is quite unique. Unless you show symptoms, you never feel that you are affected. To my relative and close friend, I always say in Bahasa Indonesia, this COVID-19 is like sakit bersertifikat, because the doctors give you a certificate that you are positive or reactive to this test, then you are considered COVID-19 patients, although you don't feel anything. So that's why it's really important to believe the government, to believe the authorities, health authorities, that we're really in a crisis. We are really in unprecedented crisis of our time. I hope we will not be facing this similar crisis in the future. Not in my time, not in your time, not in our children's time. So that's why it's really important. And if we look at the trade, it also affected. But then it showed this sign of recovery, both export and import. I was showing all these simply to tell you, because I know you have read a lot about the situation on COVID-19, you read newspapers, you watch TVs, you read books and all these publications. So I don't want to repeat everything in terms of data and what the situations in Indonesia. But what I would like to send you a message is that we should be optimistic. We in the recovery path. So we should not be sort of less optimistic. So let's see what happened in the first, this is come to a situation with a bit more specifically, a situation in ASEAN and other countries. The first half of the year, which Pak Dekan mentioned about the recession, you see how Indonesia still, did pretty much better than most of other countries. You see on the left, PRC even experiencing contractions, 1.6%. India even worse, 10.1%. Indonesia, well, still experience contractions, but only 1.3%. These figures not from the government. These figures from international organizations. So it's very much trusted. It's not about me telling the story of the governments, because I'm not the governments here, but it's about me telling the story from ADB, which are very reputable institutions in the regions. And you see the rest of the figures. How are the countries experiencing contractions even worse? And if you see some area, later on I can show you what's happening, then we are quite lucky that Indonesia is much less affected Our economy is still running. Many of the activities still conducted, although less and less in terms of the scale, but we are still very much lucky. So we should be grateful for that. And this is the responses by the Asian government in terms of policy package. Maybe you heard about Pemulihan Ekonomi Nasional. Later on, I'm going to show you that picture. But I would like to briefly show you, this is really what the government has done in Asia. You see the package, mostly the government support. This blue bar is government support to income and revenue. In the case of Indonesia, is like bantuan BLT, bantuan langsung tunai, or something like that. Really to support the affected people and families. And you see how the governments really show what they're doing really to expand the fiscal to help people. If you look specifically on Southeast Asia, in which Indonesia is the largest economy, you see that here. How the government provided quite significant amount of assistance. And this 5.7 in terms of percentage to GDP. This considered quite high. Economic students should know this number. And other areas as well, including direct long-term lending. And also, you see how other countries or other regions have done. And this East Asia include China, Korea, and Japan, because they have much higher percentage because these are rich countries. All these three countries are much richer than many other Asian countries. And this is really show what I was talking before about regional GDP. But you can see this V-shape. Many people, they don't believe in V-shape. Of course, V-shape can be really shaped, can be a little flattened. At the same time, still, show the recovery path. Asian Development Bank, this data is very much from Asian Development Outlook, which you can download from the website to really understand the whole picture of the Asian economy. But we should be optimistic, as I said, by next year, hopefully we would experience again positive trend to growth. If not all countries or all sectors, but at least the majority of economic sources showing a positive sign. And also this one, a little lower than if this were no COVID, but still showing in the right directions. And this one shows also from Asian Economic Outlook. You can see what happened. This ADO is the original forecast. This ADOU, if you can see it clearly, let me know if you cannot see it, because I'm focusing my eyes on the chart, so will not be able to really read the chat box. This ADOU is an update released in September and 2021 compared to 2020. You see where our position is. For Indonesia, this year we're going to experience negative growth, but much less compared to other countries. By next year, hopefully, we will see a positive growth again. And you see here, the picture really clearly shows Indonesia is much lucky, as I said. Other than Korea, I believe, and Vietnam, no other countries really go in that kind of direction as Indonesia. I have so many countries that I have been observing on this growth, and also I represent in ADB, I also represent some other countries, including if you see this graph, this table, Fiji is also one of the countries I represent. This year, it's experiencing minus 19.8 growth. That means contractions, nothing grow. In fact, actually things get set back. And next year, they can only grow 1%, not enough to really get everything back to normal. So many other countries, in fact, actually experiencing loss from this COVID-19, and we are quite okay. Let me move to Indonesia's situation. You see these contractions maybe more like comparing with what happened in 1998. You see here, I mean, as an economic students, I believe you're very familiar with the components of economic growth or sources of economic growth. It can come from consumption and also from investment. And you see right now the government's consumption is really critical. It's needed. So if someone says that why the government is running huge fiscal deficit, seems not ideal. I fully agree if it's in a normal situation. And then someone might come and say why the government need to borrow money from overseas. Because government revenue is contracted as well as the private. So what happened? Someone need to help countries. And this is not happening only in Indonesia, but most countries in the world, they seek for help from outside, including Japan, including US, including European countries. How they seek for help? Through different ways. Some countries, they sell more like obligations or government's bonds to overseas. Some countries go to international financial institutions like ADB, including Indonesia, simply to cope with COVID-19 pandemic. This is a situation that happened quite suddenly. So they need to get help. They're not ready. If you rely on tax revenues, for example, tax revenues comes gradually. It would not happen that whatever amount projected in the APBN or in the state budget, the government can collect it just like that. It comes gradually because people pay taxes not at the same time. Some people get their tax due in March. Many others might get the tax due in September or end of the year, even the following years. So the governments need to keep moving. If the government stop moving, then situations might have been worse. So you see how the government's contribution is really important during this COVID-19 or in any crisis. At the same time, this also shows domestic consumption. As you know, domestic consumption in Indonesia's growth is really important. It's the main driver of Indonesia's growth for many years, particularly household consumption. And you see the contractions compared to the previous period, how that's reduced. And we need to make it up to make sure that we don't lose anymore in the future. At least we don't really get that even reduced further. And this is, as I said, Indonesia is moving in the right directions in coping with this COVID-19. If you see this Q3 of 2020, Pak Dekan mentioned about the situation in Indonesia that we entered the recessions. And you all know what a recession is. But what you should know really, a recession is about numbers. It's not really something that stops us from working. when we see a recession, because somehow the definition of a recession is when a country experiencing negative growth in 2 quarters in a row. Like in the case of Indonesia, Q2 was negative and Q3 was also negative. By definitions, Indonesia entered a recession. Whether in reality that is the case, the story can be different. It depends on all of us. If we can move, if we can continue to work, if we can continue to produce, certainly by complying with strict protocol, that might rebound. Situation might be back to a positive trend. And you see all these, I mean, moving really in good directions. Consumption picking up, government consumption, of course, and also export somehow, although slowly, but it picking up. And let's hope things going in that directions, all sectors, all areas, all regions. Then by next year, we're gonna experience more positive situations. And this is just to really show you a specific graph, as Pak Wakil Rector mentioned earlier, different sectors. I believe you have these figures with you. I don't have to really show further about this. And I'm gonna move to this Program Economy Nasional, what we call in ADB Economic Recovery Program. And you see, I'm not in the position to really explain everything about this. And I believe if you really want to know what the government's doing, this is the data that you really have to understand first. But one thing I would like to mention, government's really serious, and ADB is there to have the governments, to work closely with the governments. And later on, I'm gonna show you what we have done in partnering with the governments. So by then you can see on the right-hand side, the handling costs of these COVID-19 in reaching 700 trillion rupiah. That's a lot of money. That's not a small money. And you imagine, actually, if a family in Banda Aceh earn a few millions rupiah every month, and if you compare to this amount, then you know how many millions of people really benefit. And since the governments really have this packet, I think it's really our obligation to really check and monitor whether this is really beneficial and whether it has provided benefit to all of us. You can check everything on social protections, what the government has been doing, whether the government has really gives incentives to businesses, and also on bailing out some strategic corporation or business. It's not necessarily that when we say corporate financing, that means only give to the richest, but basically to avoid them going bankrupt, because thousands of people work and rely the income on these corporations. It's important for the government to really help them. But then our duty as a citizen to really check whether that has been going through a proper mechanism with some transparencies in it. And also you see the sectoral and regional governments, quite significant amounts allocated by the government. Then we should know every items under these columns, we need to know, is there an impact? Or maybe the approach not quite right. And also on SME and health. Now, as I mentioned earlier, let me briefly share with you what we do. I think it's quite natural. As an Asian Development Bank, we provide financing. But you need to know that we also provide advisory role. We also provide knowledge. When I say knowledge, unlike knowledge that you produce in university, our knowledge very much to share what we have done in some other places. For example, Indonesia has benefited a lot in the past in the energy sector. We help Indonesia building power plants, building transmission lines, and in fact, we're the largest creditor from international multilateral agencies in the area of renewable energy. And when I say knowledge, simply we learn from the government as the government learns from us, quite what we're doing here. So this is ADB. The headquarters is in Manila. Our Rector visited the headquarters and also several others have been there. But quite sad that we don't have many Indonesian staff working in the ADB. Maybe Indonesia is really cinta tanah air. They don't want to move out. They want to stay close to their family. Indonesia is the 6th largest shareholders of ADB, the largest in ASEAN. If we take that as sort of our quota, we should have at least close to 100 staff. But the fact we only have less than 30 staff, less than 30 international staff in the headquarters in Manila. We do have country office in Indonesia, in Jakarta, but we have more national staff, which is very much important, but in ADB, they don't move much in terms of assignment to different countries. So we need all of you to study really hard, pursue your education further. As I said, get to know people from other universities, get to know people from other regions, other countries. In fact, those studying in Europe and US, and then pursue your career in the development fields, including working for ADB. I hope I could see one day someone from Syiah Kuala to work as a permanent international staff in ADB. And this is the what we do with Indonesia in area. You can check that from ADB website. This would be my last sort of information to you, because I'm expecting some questions to come. ADB and Indonesia developed what we call country partnership strategy. And this is related to COVID-19. What we do, first, we improve the well-being of the citizens. And second, we accelerate economic recovery of the country. And the last thing, which is very important, we strengthen the resilience of the country and the people. So really important to really have this, and you can check. This is also a document available in the website. If you get interested in, then you can read, and we're happy to have a discussion further on this. Specifically on COVID-19 responses, ADB has entered this cooperation with the government since March 2020. In fact, Indonesia was the first country whose COVID-19 response package approved by ADB. ADB has 68 member countries from all over the world, from Europe, US, Asia, Pacific, Central Asia, and 48 countries that are eligible for ADB's assistance. And Indonesia was the first country that ADB came and helped. Then if you ask a question, that's simply because Indonesia like to borrow from other countries. Not that easy. To get an assistant from ADB is really tough. It requires tough negotiation. And many countries, they know, because ADB's assistance is really valuable. And even the financing is really cheap, means compared to the market. So Indonesia has to compete with other countries like India, Philippines, Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, Pacific countries, Uzbekistan, Armenia. I don't know if any of you knows where Armenia is, or Cook Islands. Both are my countries under my constituency. But as an executive director, I fought for the country, and because of the support also from everyone, then we got Indonesia to be approved as the first country. Before I close, maybe really to share some advice which I did before. This is good to Hima Dipa and other students associations and all of you, the University of Syiah Kuala students, and maybe anyone who's participating in these presentations or these sessions. Be optimistic. Invest in your mental and physical resilience. You should be optimistic. You should always have a positive mindset. Know your strength. Unless you know your strengths, it's really difficult to compete. At the same time, of course, you should know your weaknesses. Learn from others, reach out to others. At the same time, you should be lucky because your values are important. Value here include everything, actually. Your environment, your families, your traditions, your religions. I missed that, to be honest. I missed very much how people value that, the opening by saying Alhamdulillah, Salatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah, and all this, which I didn't see that in the place I work. Because, it's international environment, many people come from different countries, but I value very much that you value. You should be grateful to Allah all the time. You should always value your friendship with your root. And lastly, talk to everyone, as I said. Don't avoid anyone who tell you the truth, including your professors. When I studied, I know when I was a student like you back about 26, 27 years ago, maybe, during my time in university, people talk about like killer professor, something like that. I hope that's not happening anymore. But I valued very much what they taught me. If you're really in very comfort zone, you don't learn much. So get strength and then learn a lot from whoever and wherever and whenever. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much. And I hope what I mentioned could be useful to you. And I'm happy to really have further conversation through chat box or direct questions. Thank you very much. Over to you, Maula.
So we've been get some insight from Mr. Surkani himself, and he told us a lot about the point of views from ADB and his point of views of how to get a change on working on ADB someday. And all of us actually hope that maybe a part of Syiah Kuala University student will be the staff at his current office. So as I mentioned at the beginning, that if this discussion is going to be much more interactive and like a sharing things, and I already picked some questions from the participants. And the first question came from Muhammad Rizky Ramadan. He asked about permit to answer if economic growth is slowed down and the public consumption is decreasing. Global investment is also going down. Thank you. Time is yours to giving the answer for these questions.
Thank you very much. Very important questions. At the same time, not easy to really respond to these questions. Well, I believe my professors in university knows the answer better, given they really doing the research on this economic impact. But the questions really shows, I mean, that really true the public consumption decreases and somehow affects economic growth. But you can also see from the other way around. As I mentioned, in Indonesia, consumption is really the driver of growth. So when consumption decreases, then it would affect the economic growth in the end. And of course, then of course affecting another, the second round affecting the consumption again. But what I would like to mention here is that there's no sort of an exact predictions when these economic recovery really come back to its sort of normal situation. Well, I would like to avoid the term original states, because as we all agree, I mean, people are seeing differently now. The surrounding, the economic hope and everything. But what I can mention to you, I mean, ADB's predictions, it might take about 3-4 years at least, maybe to 2024, to see some, I mean, like, most of countries in a recovery path. The situation is like this. First, Pak Wakil Rector before mentioned about, competing, whether it's a competitions or really going really in parallel about health crisis and economic crisis. The situation handled differently in different countries. I don't know how many of you are really aware of this website, really useful one. I mean, it's called Worldometer. It's sort of showing you every day's movement of COVID-19 crisis. I can type it to you while I'm watching. I mean, I'm responding. Okay, just type that in. I put it in the chat box. Type that into Google and you get it. So you see, I mean, how some countries still experiencing very difficult situations. People in Europe was quite optimistic that the regions would have recovered very soon. But then it turned to the second wave, and some countries even experiencing third wave. Now, situation like a country as small as Belgium, with 11 million people, new cases happen every day. I mean, like could reach 10,000. And you imagine Indonesia with 270 millions experience around like 4,000 new cases every day. So not necessarily country as advanced as Europe handle these things better than us, because the way we see these crisis management in terms of COVID-19 response is how many new cases every day. Less new cases means better management. People might say, oh, because you don't have really, I mean, a proper count of COVID-19 PCR tests. But that happened only in the first few months. But now we've been like 8 months already. Then we know if people really get affected. So we should be grateful for that. I mean, I'm not saying that Europe not doing good in how they handle this crisis, but countries handle this COVID-19 differently. And you see China, actually, the numbers, not, I mean, I don't know whether it's already reached 100,000 cases. But the figures that they have published still, I mean, quite less. But then Philippines and Indonesia now have reached 400,000 cases. So quite difficult risky. If you ask me personally, when that original states would happen. To me, I mean, some countries might get the recovery back by 3 years. depend on the size of the economy and how diverse that economy is. But for Indonesia might take maybe longer years, 4 years, 5 years. But it doesn't mean we cannot do anything. And also, as people say, leaders always come in crisis. So I hope all of you can be the next leaders, because crisis create new leaders. You saw that what happened in 1997 during ASEAN crisis. I don't know whether any of you can really hear that. And secondly, you saw what happened in 2008 during global financial crisis. Many new leaders, came and gave good stories about how they really handle situations. I hope my response is sufficient, as I cannot give really exact time about this economic recovery. Thank you, Maula.
Yep. Welcome. And now we have a second question, apparently. The second question is about, is there any possibilities of the funding from the country change its pattern causing by the COVID? What I get from this question is, sir, is that we usually much more focusing on infrastructure, and now COVID came, and does it gonna be changed later on? Because the healthcare system and also the prevention and stuff, whether is it gonna be changed or not?
Well, yes and no. That's a very easy way to respond, right?
Yeah.
Let me say this. A country program has been planned for, it's not for 1 or 2 years. Country priorities, like in the case of Indonesia, it's like a 5 years plan. We call it medium term and longer term. Rencana Pembangunan Jangka Panjang. Why we do that? Because resources cannot be allocated just like in the household. In the household, when you have ₱1 million, you can allocate the money today. When you execute that tomorrow, you change it because it's easy. Only maybe 4 or 5 members of the family. Like today, you say, I'm gonna use this $1 million or ₱1 million to buy food and to go shopping, But then the next day, maybe something comes up and you say, look, I'm not gonna go shopping. I'm gonna buy food and fix the house. Maybe because it's rain and you see some leaks in your house. So you can change that quite easily. But a country as big as Indonesia, that's not the situation. Why? Because to really develop, it requires sort of process. From the preparation, and you sign contracts, and also you have to balance between different needs of development, with different regions. How you see, maybe, again, I'm speaking here not as a representative of the government, don't get me wrong. You see how the governments keep building tollways. You might ask the questions, why during crisis the government still build tollways? That has been planned, but it doesn't mean that we stop doing what more important, like COVID-19. Let me give you a much narrower perspective, maybe to really give an illustration. The government of Indonesia every year benefit from ADB's assistance up to $2 billion, right? $2 billion, that's a lot of money to build infrastructures in energy and transportation and education and agriculture. Energy very much on renewable energy or building transmission, as I said earlier, helping PLN, particularly to Eastern Indonesia, and hopefully soon, we hope could come to Aceh to fix electricity problem in Aceh. But we need you all actually to help send a positive signal to the central governments. But during COVID-19, ADB provided around 1.5 billion additional support. 1.5 billion additional support, not included as part of $2 billion. Don't see that simply as a borrowing. That means tambah hutang, but how the governments get help to strengthen the health-related sectors. You know, provided these, you know, PPE, what do you call it in Indonesia? I mean, like personal protective equipments, this shield, everything, you know, the baju hazmat. And also, the government provided subsidies. I mentioned about what happened with the direct transfers. And also I mentioned about several important initiatives created by the government. I'm not saying ADB is the only institutions, but just small part of what the government's doing. So basically, if you ask me whether it would change the pattern, I don't think for a country as big as Indonesia would be so much. Smaller countries, yes, particularly those countries in the Pacific that are reliant of tourism. I mentioned, which I also would like to challenge you to close my response on this. I mentioned about a country in Armenia, which you heard in TV, I mean the Nagorno-Karabakh. The Nagorno-Karabakh war with Azerbaijan. But I don't know how you really know this country, Armenia. It's a 5 million people, but very well educated people at the same time. I have also another country called Cook Islands in the middle of the Pacific. So my challenge to you is that find on the internet the size of the populations of this country. You will be amazed if you relate this to COVID-19, how this COVID-19 affecting more than 80% of their GDP. Can you imagine if Indonesia contracted, contractions only minus 0.1, 0.5%, Cook Islands experienced minus 80% of their GDP. That means they lost revenues more than 80%. If someone earned money 1 million rupiah this month or this year, or last year, this year's maybe they earn only 200,000 rupiah, but they need this remain the same. So you can imagine. So I'll stop there, Maula. Thank you.
Okay. Now we would like to give the chance for Rifki Saputra to ask the question in a live way. So I'm not gonna read his question, but I would like to present him to you. So Rifki Saputra, time is yours.
Ya, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
I would like to ask you some questions, sir. As you may know, Pak Shurkani, compared to other Asia country, China economy is by far better than other Asia country as a result of their success on controlling the number of COVID-19 patients. My questions will be, should we implement the same strict rules like the one China did in order to make a V-shaped recovery a reality rather than a U-shaped or an L-shaped recovery? Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a very, very interesting questions. And thank you for asking that questions. Well, you mentioned that China's economy is doing better because they somehow could control, the number of COVID-19. But I would say a little different. China's economy has been better. Even before COVID-19. And the situation is not that better during COVID-19. Because to compare an economy, you have to compare with a similar sort of criteria. Like in the case that I presented to you, the percentage of the GDP. Indonesia's experienced contractions, as I mentioned earlier, 1.3%, 1.5%, but China at least bigger. The contractions is 1.6, 1.7%. Overall, yes, given the size of the economy, maybe would not affect too much the whole country. But I could say China is still facing difficulties. A lot of people not able to really move freely in the country. And if you ask me whether we have to follow what the China has taken in terms of steps, I mean, with these stringent containment measures that you saw in the graph, well, it depends on the governments. As ADB, I think it's good, which very much Pawaki Rector earlier mentioned about several measures that need to be in place. ADB has been advocating to do more testing to get to know how many really affected. But at the same time, we should not restrict people from moving because economy need to grow. People need to live. They need to earn to buy food. They need to earn money for schooling, for many things. So the best way is that for the governments to increase the number of tests, then they will know actually who's affected, who's not, and impose these strict protocols. For example, as I said, do more online meeting like this instead of going to the campus and meet physically. It would not reduce the quality of the meeting as long as you really discuss about the substances. But at the same time, the situation is quite different. China is a big land country. You can move without needing any perahu or any sort of airplane. I mean, of course, it's quite far from Shanghai to Guangdong or from Beijing even to southern cities. But still, I mean, within, that big mainland, Indonesia is island country. From Banda Aceh, even to go to Sabang is not easy. If the ferry stops, that's it. Right? So to me, it depends on the situation. I mean, so far, I believe the governments of Indonesia has taken the right way or the right approach. What they need to improve may be more the implementations to make sure that people really understands how dangerous this virus is, dangerous in terms of blocking our future, giving impacts on our children's futures, living, and how we need to really abide by the rules. If we cannot really, go to a place with more than 5 people, for example, we have to follow that. And one thing I would like to really share with you here, China is very centralized. It adopts a centralized system. Everything ruled from the capital. When it say something, people will follow. Not necessarily because they like it to follow that, simply because they're the rules. Let me give you a very interesting story about the Philippines. Maybe you've heard about President Duterte. Philippines is like Indonesia, a democratic country, right? Everyone can say everything, and everyone can, just express everything, almost everything. And also the same in the Philippines. But one thing's different. The president is quite tough, coming from a quite a unique background. So people follow him simply because they're afraid. Just for our conversation, I know it's recorded, but don't take it. Don't take it as what I say. As a source of information. But people sometimes afraid if I don't follow the government might shoot me. Whether we would expect that to happen in Indonesia, I don't think so. We live in a very nice country, I have to say. Actually, I've missed Indonesia so much. And I miss, the situation in the country. I miss makan mie Aceh, mie goreng, all these. I don't find that in the Philippines. right? So if you ask me whether we have to follow that path, what China has done, is very much depend. If we are ready with the consequence, let's follow. But if we see, I mean, that we live in an island country with very diverse communities, we better find our own way. You know, let the people to understand better rather than push them to really follow blindly. I think that's respond to your questions, I hope. Thanks.
Okay, now we will come to the last questions from Zaidan Fala. I'll read the questions. From the ADB member point of view, sir, is there any different strategies that applied by each countries to dealing with COVID and how it will recover? So, time is yours.
Thank you. I think I presented that in my presentation before. I mean, I could show it to you again if let me see if I can show that. Okay. Can you see that? Mola, can you see the screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which really to also respond to the previous questions. When you see, I mean, this is how the government reacts, basically in different countries reacted to COVID-19 through stringent containment measures. This shows the media responses to what they do with the COVID-19. And that somehow affects, a later result in terms of economic recovery and growth. And you see, I mean, this darker bar shows very strict measures like total lockdown, people couldn't go out. And this bright color bar shows relaxation or sort of, maybe less strict measures imposed. So countries, I mean, you can read this. I mean, it's available actually in the website of ADB. It covers all member countries in Asia. So basically, different countries, of course, applies different rules, different measures. But at the same time, they come up with different results. One thing that's very interesting to observe is, let me stop. Okay. One thing which very much interesting to observe is what happened to Malaysia. Malaysia was not in the hotspot for the past several months and started to be in that zone a few weeks before. So that shows, I mean, different countries impose different strategies to deal with COVID-19. But then in the end, my personal observation is, I might be wrong, but my personal observations, in the end, most countries would experience almost the same situations, either previously, either right now, or soon in the future. What I meant was, in the case of COVID-19 in China, I mean, experienced quite tough situation back in Wuhan. I believe, I mean, you heard from some of your friends who studied there from Aceh, how the city of few millions people totally locked down. That was quite shocking. Where other countries didn't do that, Wuhan was totally locked down. And Wuhan, is a center of advanced technology. I visited China about a year ago, I think a year and a half ago, to southern China, visiting different cities. Shows how impressive the development in IT industry was. And Wuhan was one of them. So it really affected the city of several millions of people. But they did that, right? And they saw the result now, as a previous speaker asked, whether we have to follow that path. But then you saw, I mean, some other countries were quite relaxing. Seems that they didn't believe in COVID and they didn't impose that strict measures. Now they're experiencing And like in the case of Europe, I mean, if you really follow what's happening in Europe, like in France, in Germany, Netherlands, Belgium, I mean, Spain, all these countries, you know, there was a surge back in April and then slowed down, and they reopened the economy because they depend on tourism. In Europe, July and August was summertime. So they couldn't afford not going out. That's really a culture of Europe, you know, and many other countries, that once a year they need to go out, to go to interesting places. So the government couldn't afford to close all these tourism destinations or spots. When they opened, the case increased. Now, some countries experience the second wave, and some countries experience, in fact, the third wave. You see the graph going up and down. And quite hard, actually, whether to impose different strategies. Of course, yes, I mean, countries imposing different strategies with different result. But my personal observation again, most countries in Asia, one way or another, now or before, experience basically the same situations in terms of this COVID virus pandemic and the impact on the economy. Even countries like Australia and New Zealand, that very much isolated, experience the worst situations back a few months ago. Thank you, Mola.
So we've come to the last session for our today's seminar. But before I close the event, I would like to acknowledge to all of the participants to turn on the camera, and we are going to have some live photo session. So yeah. Okay. In 3, 2, 1. Dah. Lagi? Okay, one more. Alah, apa? In 3, 2, and 1. Okay. Nah kan? Okay, 1. 3, 2, 1. Okay, one more time. 3, 2, 1. Dah. Udah kan?
Oke, gimana? Sudah selesai?
Sudah Pak, sebentar Pak ya, kita pastikan dulu dokumentasinya bagus, biar ada kenang-kenangannya Pak.
Maula.
Iya Pak, yes sir.
Before we close the session, may I say a few words, if I may, dengan izin Pak Wakil Rektor dan Pak Dekan?
Oh iya.
Okay. I'll do it in Bahasa because Maula asked me to speak English, Pak. I mean, I'm a bit tired. I mean, keep talking. Baik, pertama terima kasih sekali lagi Pak Wakil Rektor, Pak Hizir, dan juga Pak Profesor Nasir selaku dekan, dan Bapak Ibu semua. Mungkin pesan saya lebih kepada supaya just to feel right ya, menyampaikan dalam bahasa Indonesia. Isu COVID ini bukan isu jangka pendek, saya ingin tekankan itu. Jadi jangan sampai kita terdistracted atau terpengaruh dengan berita-berita di social media dan di national headlines tentang kondisi jangka pendek gitu. Things can happen overnight, but impact happen longer. Jadi yang terjadi itu belum tentu akan langsung berdampak. Kita melihat begitu ada angka naik, misalkan jadi 4.000, kita kaget gitu ya. Tetapi itu sebenarnya lebih kepada statistical data. Pak Hizir, paham persis kalau itu. Tapi what is the impact dalam jangka waktu yang lebih lama? Nah, jadi supaya teman-teman yang mahasiswa baik S1, S2 dan S3 gitu ya, coba dibaca terus gitu ya, dibaca terus informasi tidak hanya dari satu pihak gitu ya, dari semua pihak dan seperti saya sampaikan tadi banyak sumber-sumber bagus sekarang termasuk yang bahasa Inggris dan juga bahasa Indonesia sehingga nanti pemahaman terhadap COVID itu benar gitu ya. Dan juga pemahaman terhadap how government handles, kita boleh setuju dan tidak setuju dengan cara pemerintah menghandle, tetapi jangan sampai membuat kita pesimistik gitu. Jangan sampai membuat kita apatis, seolah-olah nih we live in a situation yang nggak akan recover gitu. Dan saya sangat senang dengan pertanyaan tadi, karena banyak pertanyaan yang sebenarnya lebih kepada curiosity, daripada mengatakan bahwa things not doing in the right directions. Nah, dan saya juga ucapan selamat kepada teman-teman, ini luar biasa dan juga kesempatan saya diberikan, saya dihubungin kira-kira 3 bulan yang lalu Pak Dekan sama teman-teman gitu ya. Kebetulan saya waktu itu tidak terlalu yakin bisa karena kondisi COVID ini kebetulan memang luar biasa di ADB juga. Kita sibuk sekali karena kita memberikan paket bantuan sampai 20 miliar dolar. Jadi kita harus urus 48 negara anggota itu termasuk Indonesia. Nah, tapi alhamdulillah hari ini bisa bertemu kembali dengan Pak Wakil Rektor dan Pak Dekan dan teman-teman semua, Bapak Ibu dan adik-adik. Mudah-mudahan bisa berlanjut. Tadi pesan Pak Wakil Rektor dan Pak Dekan juga bangun motivasi bahwa Universitas Kuala itu mampu untuk bersaing di luar. Jadi tidak perlu kecewa atau berkecil hati karena kita berada di ujung barat. Dan saya selalu sampaikan, kebetulan saya namanya Dean of the Board ya, anggota board yang paling senior. Tadi Pak Hizir sampaikan, there's no one above me. Actually half true Pak. There's no, of course, the truth is no one really above my positions, tapi ada orang lain yang setara yaitu President of ADB. So we kind of like partners gitu ya. Mungkin kalau sebagian teman-teman mungkin sudah melihat ADB provide itu. Tapi saya ingin sampaikan, saya yang datang dari ujung Sumatera sama seperti teman-teman saat ini, kita bisa berhasil gitu ya. Bisa menunjukkan kita mampu. Berhasil itu relatif ya. Dengan izin Allah, dengan usaha kita, insya Allah kita bisa. Ingin menyampaikan itu sekali lagi. Terima kasih sekali Pak Wakil Rektor sudah stay, Pak Dekan sudah stay, Pak. Mudah-mudahan kita bisa bertemu segera, Pak. Kalau tidak dalam kondisi fisik, paling tidak kita nanti bincang-bincang lagi dalam kondisi virtual. Dan juga terima kasih kepada panitia dan juga kepada Maula. I mean, your English so good. Even I didn't feel confidence talking in English. Keep working, keep going. Action everyone. Terima kasih. Itu sekian dari saya.
Ada saran satu ini Pak Syukani, kalau boleh sebulan sekali kita coba diagendakan secara reguler. Kami juga senang mendengar berita-berita baru ya, perkembangan ekonomi. Saya kira boleh nanti di-arrange dengan baik oleh EKP, apakah 2 bulan sekali atau bagaimanalah ya. Saya kira mohon disediakan waktu ini permintaan Pak Rektor ini. Baik, terima kasih banyak, luar biasa presentasinya.
Oke, terima kasih. Saya ingin bicara juga sedikit. Ini tadi Pak Surkani ini Prof. Nasir kan, bagaimana untuk bisa katakanlah internship gitu ya, magang selama mungkin kalau enggak pun nanti kalau sudah pandemi berakhir, kalau tidak pun 1 semester tapi 1 bulan, tapi mungkin saat ini bisa kita coba magang online gitu, virtual mobility gitu. Nah, mungkin nanti kami coba rancang sekarang ini di OIA, di Maula juga di OIA juga ada program yang virtual mobility gitu. Nah, ini mereka ini mahasiswa-mahasiswa kita tahu apa aja aktivitas di ADB. Jadi pengalaman apa yang bisa didapatkan oleh mahasiswa kita. Jadi kita sebut ini nanti ada SKS-nya nih Prof. Nasir ya. Jadi ini kan magang, internship, ada SKS yang diberikan ke mahasiswa nantinya. Dan ini sesuai dengan program Mas Nadiem Makarim. Mudah-mudahan begitu nanti kita coba ini. Mumpung sekarang ini Pak Surkani masih di Manila, kita berharap beliau sukses terus, sehat terus, sukses dan menjalankan sekarang sebagai direktur eksekutif ini dengan baik dan membanggakan kita semua. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih Pak Wakil Rektor, Pak Dekan. Saya rasa kesempatan itu ada dan terbuka. Program magang internship itu setiap tahun ada di ADB. Memang dia bersaing gitu ya, bersaing dalam pengertian dibuka ke semua negara anggota dan itu dibayar oleh ADB. Ada banyak nanti kalau masuk ke ADB website itu ada informasinya. Jadi yang penting teman-teman nanti ada informasinya bagaimana eligibility-nya, bagaimana saya kira-kira memenuhi syarat apa tidak untuk saya magang gitu ya. Mungkin karena ADB ini sifatnya international environment, mereka memang masih menekankan kepada yang mereka yang belajar di program masters dan doctors, terutama yang untuk analytical work gitu. Tapi bukan berarti kesempatan untuk teman-teman yang di program bachelor atau sarjana tertutup. Nah, karena ADB juga punya program, punya kantor di Jakarta. Nah, kebetulan di sini ada beberapa teman ADB Jakarta yang saya ajak untuk ikut mendengar. Ada Pak Aji, kemudian ada Pak Bagus, ada juga Pak Cahyadi. Mereka nanti mudah-mudahan bisa memfollow up. Nanti saya juga akan follow up Pak Wakil Rektor nanti supaya ada kesempatan teman-teman untuk minimal online, magang online itu menarik gitu. Ya, online internship gitu ya. Mungkin once a week mereka dikasih assignment, kemudian nanti akan di coaching gitu ya. Dan itu akan menurut saya itu bisa. Hanya mungkin untuk waktu sampai akhir tahun ataupun kita lihatlah. Karena kebetulan ADB ini teman staffnya cukup pressure juga karena banyak project dan policy yang harus mereka garap karena situasi di setiap negara request-nya beda-beda. Jadi Indonesia berbeda request, Cina berbeda, India berbeda, itu negara-negara yang sangat-sangat besar. Kemudian kecil-kecil juga Maldives gitu ya, terus yang Pasifik, Fiji segala macam itu juga beda-beda. Tapi nanti kita ini, saya rasa itu ide yang menarik untuk ada online internship gitu ya. Kita lihat nanti, paling tidak ada regular update atau engagement lah gitu. Nanti difasilitasi. Dan nanti saya sampaikan ke teman-teman di ADB Jakarta paling tidak supaya coverage-nya bisa lebih besar. Nanti mungkin sekali-kali bisa dicoba dengan staff senior yang dari ADB headquarters. Nah, cuma memang ADB ini kan organisasi internasional, jadi mereka membutuhkan active participation. Jadi kalau kita hanya dengar, mungkin ya mereka juga tidak tahu kebutuhan kita. Jadi kita sendiri yang harus offer apa yang ingin kita lakukan gitu, apa yang ingin yang kita butuhkan gitu, kira-kira begitu. Tapi nanti kita bisa follow up Pak Hizir, insya Allah. Terima kasih.
So we've come to the end of our seminar session. Me, Nikmal Maula, as the moderator, will close this precious event, and I would like to say I'm really grateful and thankful for the opportunity, and I'm really happy that today Mr. Surkani is able to participating in this event. And let's hope that COVID-19 will be gone and we are going to meet soon in a healthy and good condition. At the end, I would like to say Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Waalaikumsalam.
Warahmatullahi
Terima kasih
wabarakatuh.
Pak.
Oke, mohon izin. Terima kasih banyak nih Pak Surkani. Luar biasa.
Sampai ketemu insya Allah sehat terus. Ya.
Amin, amin. Makasih Pak Dekan, Pak Wakil Rektor, makasih semuanya.
Salam kami dari
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Terima kasih semuanya.
Waalaikumsalam.
Juga panitia ini luar biasa nih menyelenggarakan acara ini. Terima kasih, sukses terus. Semangat ya. Tadi pesan satu dari Pak Surkani bahwa berani untuk keluar dari comfort zone ya. Ini harapan untuk mahasiswa semua. Terima kasih, saya mohon izin. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.